Hello and welcome everyone, we Weeb online, and today I'm gonna continue the story What if Naruto and female Kurama were stuck on an island part 3. This will be the last part. I hoped it would have continued, but this was it. So subscribe to my channel to watch more series, and now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Lots of good things had come from exploring the island. From the one bunker they found a whole network of tunnels that led to all kinds of places on the island. They found all kinds of things, like crates full of random bits and pieces, more spoiled sake, and strange metal devices that looked like tubes with switches on them. Actually, those weren't that interesting, because they didn't know what to think about it all. Plus, when they found the best thing on the island so far, they had almost forgotten about all the other things. It was a hot spring in the ground. A natural hot spring surrounded by tasty fruit trees and close to a beautiful clearing big enough for them to build another shelter. Also, it was close enough to the river that they could drink hot or cold water whenever they wanted. After all the dirty tunnels they had to crawl through, it was like heaven had opened up and welcomed them in. The whole trip was worth it because they got to spend time together, but finding that beautiful, steamy spring made it even better. They wanted to enjoy this great find for as long as they could. So, for the first few days, they didn't even dare put a toe in its healing waters, let alone step in. Yumiko had decided to wait a while before using the hot spring because she knew that as soon as they got in, they would be hooked on the feeling of hot water after being on the island for so long without it. Naruto had at first said no, but a few soft kisses and sweet looks were all it took to change his mind. After all, she did have that power over him. But now that those few days were over, they could finally go to the hot spring and have fun. Naruto said, "Uo," as he shivered and slowly lowered himself into the hot water of the spring. As she watched him, Yumiko let out a soft, amused snort. She had let him go in first. "That's how good it feels, huh?" "Yes, it does," he said with a sigh as he slid himself closer to the hot spring and rested his shoulders and the back of his head on the smooth rocks nearby. "I feel like I'm going to melt." When Yumiko put her toe in the water, she moaned, "It can't really be that gross. See, that's how good it is." She got red in the face as she slowly went down into the water. It really does." She said the last word slowly, pausing just a little bit on the last syllable because she was so happy. And I thought I was being dramatic," he said with a quiet laugh as he moved slowly toward her. "Naruto, it's been almost a century since I've enjoyed a hot spring," she said softly, making a sound like his earlier soft sigh. Naruto replied with a hum. I guess that could make it more intense for you," Yumiko said to Naruto. "You know, Naruto." Her nervous voice made Naruto raise an eyebrow. "Maybe the reason it hurts so much when you touch me is because I'm a few thousand years old and you're the first person to ever touch me that way," he said. He asked, "Is that a bad thing?" She shook her head quickly. "No, Naruto, not at all." "Well," Naruto stopped for a moment to catch his breath. "When you first used your hand, it was really intense for me because I hadn't really touched myself since we got to this island because at first I didn't give you any privacy. And now because you have me to do it for you," she asked as she slowly walked over to where he was sitting and smiled at him. "Yeah." He smiled back at her with red cheeks. She sat down next to him and hummed a sweet note that sounded like a song. She wrapped one of her arms around one of his, and as she rested her head on his shoulder, she pushed her big, round, and full breasts against him. In response, he kissed her cheek and tucked some stray strands of her silky orange hair behind her ear with his free hand. When his fingers touched one of her ears, she let out a quiet purr. This made him want to go a little further and give her some nice ear scratches, which made her eyes roll back and start moaning. "And Naruto," Yumiko's voice trailed off. He turned his head and started nibbling on her other ear, which made her moan again. "Wow, that's different," he said between bites. "Your ears are always so sensitive." Yumiko nodded slowly. They are. Are you the most sensitive person there?" He whispered into her ear before going back to nibbling on her fingers. I don't know, Naruto. I don't know what part of me is the most sensitive." His lips were licked. "Would you like to know?" When she heard him whisper those words in her ear, she shivered because he had said them in such a strange way. She could feel the heat that she had grown used to after all those wonderful intimate moments with him rising quickly in that spot just below her navel, which she now knew was her womb, and on her cheeks as she blushed. With the steam from the spring rising up in front of them, she couldn't tell if the slight haze in the air was from the steam or from her growing desire. "Yes," she said, and her blush got deeper as he slowly moved his hand from her ear to her cheek and then cupped it. "Naruto, you're a lot smoother now." He made a proud smirk with the corner of his mouth. I think it's time I caught up," she said with a smirk of her own as she moved to sit on his hips. His eyes grew wide at her sudden boldness. "Naruto, don't you think When she felt how stiff he had gotten when he was trying to be nice to her, her smile wavered for a moment. He was so hard that it took almost all of her willpower to keep from shaking again. Just having his big, hot, and manly cock so close to her special place made her need it more. Yumiko held herself there for a few seconds as she calmed herself. Then, without warning, she put her hands behind his neck, slid down slowly, and pressed her large breasts against his strong chest. Naruto rewarded her hard work by letting out a soft groan when he felt the top of his member slide into the tight, smooth space between her big, round balls. Now it was his turn to blush, and he could feel his cheeks getting red. He finally said, "I feel like it doesn't really matter what I think right now, Kyumi." She gave him a sly grin. "You have just as much power over me as I do over you, Naruto, but it looks like I've taken all of it away from you right now." "It does." He put his hands on her hips and squeezed them both hard, making her bite down on her bottom lip. "So, Kyumi, how do you want to handle this?" She licked her lips in a seductive way before slowly pulling them apart. "I'd like to do something different." Naruto's brow went up. "Oh, I want to talk," I said. His blush got worse. "Oh, please," she asked in a sweet voice, tilting her head to give him a look of innocence and desire as she slowly rubbed her behind against his. Naruto swallowed quietly, but that didn't help him think of anything to say. He couldn't do anything but slowly nod. He didn't know what to say, so he let her lead him up onto one of the big, flat, smooth stones that surrounded the hot spring. Then he watched as she put her small, delicate hands on his knees and moved his legs apart so she could slide between them. He could feel her excitement move through her body in waves as she licked her full lips at the sight of his cock in front of her. As she got closer to him, her excitement mixed with his. "I've been dreaming about this for a long time," he said, blushing again. She looked up into his eyes and then smiled softly at him. "Then let me make your dream come true, my love." "Oh, darling, I actually like that a lot," Naruto said, smiling back. "I've been thinking for a while about what else to call you," Yumiko said as she tilted her head to the side and started nuzzling her cheek against his inner thigh. "Like honey or darling, my dearest was the one I liked the most." "That makes sense," he said, letting out a shaky breath as he tried not to move around. "I wouldn't mind if you used all three, because each one has its own charm." "They do." Yumiko's voice trailed off as she slowly leaned forward and pressed her face against his cock. "Your thing has a charm, too, Naruto. It draws me in, seduces me in its own way, and turns me into a lewd girl just for you." As he watched her, he let out a shaky breath. "God, you're so big, Naruto. Look at how your thing reaches all the way to my forehead when I put my chin on you. And the smell." She paused as she took a soft breath, then took a much deeper one. "It could make me drunk." Naruto would never tell her this, but he thought she looked sexiest when her face was pressed against his cock. Just the way her eyes would get half closed, her cheeks would get red, and she would wear a hazy smile was enough to drive him crazy. Part of him wanted to just grab her by the sides of her head and force himself into her mouth and down her throat. He wanted to feel her choke and gag on him. The part that won him over, though, was when she said she worshipped his cock and praised it. "Kyumi," he said in a loud, almost impatient voice as he slowly put one hand on top of her head. Sorry to keep you waiting, Naruto," she said with another smile, then moved her hand and wrapped her delicate fingers around the base of his cock. "All this steam is making me feel dizzy." She pulled herself up until her wet, full breasts were out of the water. Then she leaned in closer to him and kissed his sensitive head. In response, his thing twitched and started dripping that delicious stuff that she had grown to love from its tip. She then gave it a few licks, which made his breathing speed up as he got more and more excited. When she started to swirl her wet, soft, and warm tongue on his tip, it took all of his strength not to move his hips. "That feels really good, Kyumi," he said as he ran his fingers through her silky orange hair and tucked it behind her ear. She let out a moan of pleasure, which he took as a sign of approval. She took the head of his cock into her mouth after he praised her. She put her full lips over it and then started to play with her tongue. Naruto could only throw his head back and groan when he felt her tongue start to work. She moved it around his head, up and down that sensitive spot at the base of his head, and sucked on it to get more of his saliva out. She then began to stroke him with her hands, much to his delight, because she wanted more and better from herself. After she took his tip out of her mouth, she said, Your cock is delicious." He asked, "Is it really?" "Well, yours is," she said with a smile. He slowly put his hand on her head because he felt brave. "Kyumi, please go back to sucking." She laughed out loud. "Okay, Naruto. I'll do anything for you, my dear." Yumiko put her lips back on his sensitive head and wrapped her fingers from both hands around the base of his cock. She then tried to go as deep as she could with him. She heard him take a breath as she put more and more of him in her mouth. She stopped when she felt like she was going to throw up. She kept him there while her throat calmed down by closing her eyes and stroking him with her hands. When she looked up at him, she couldn't help but smile when she saw that he was happy. Wow, he let out a gasp. She knew what to do because she could tell from the sounds he made what he liked the most. She quickly figured out that he liked his blowjobs like his handjobs, with one of her hands wrapped around his base. She started bobbing her head up and down on his cock, making sure to caress him with her tongue while holding it steady with one hand and fondling and caressing his heavy sack with the other. She sucked so hard that her cheeks went down, and when he groaned at how hard she was sucking, it made her chest swell with pride. Tea that feels great, Kyumi, Naruto stuttered as he tried not to cough. His breathing was shallow and his pulse was fast. Now, he was so close. He could feel everything she did to him, even the smallest touches. From the way she squeezed the base of his cock to the sweet feeling of her plump lips sliding up and down his shaft to the way her warm tongue slid and swirled around his sensitive tip. He could feel it all. As his members started to grow inside her warm, welcoming mouth, he felt a tightness he could never have imagined. She sped up, making him bite down on his lip as all of those great feelings got stronger. Unkicking, Kyumiko thanked him by humming, which gave him more energy as he started to buck his hips and press himself against her throat. When he finally came, the muscles in his legs and stomach tightened up. As he erupted inside her mouth, his cock hurt and he rolled up some of her hair in his hand. She moaned rudely as several thick ropes of his hot, potent seed shot onto her tongue, throat, and the insides of her cheeks. She sucked him hard and swallowed his poop whenever she could to make his orgasm last as long as possible, which was good for both of them. He fell back with her still between his legs and let out a heavy breath, then a few soft moans. She kept bobbing her head, but now that he had finally come, she did it more slowly. Kyumi, she slowly got off of her cock, making sure to keep the suction going the whole time until she could finally let him go. Naruto, God, he said out of breath as he put his arm over his eyes. Wow, that was too good. I'm glad you had fun, my dear, Kyumiko said as she climbed over him and smiled softly at him when they were face to face. Even though he was trying to catch his breath, Naruto was able to smile back. You're amazing, Kyumi. Yes, I am, she said with a smile that slowly turned into a proud smirk. But don't you think that you're even more amazing, Naruto? He asked, how so? You're in love with the most powerful tail beast in the world, Kyumiko told him with a fox-like grin. She then sat down and nuzzled her cheek against his chest. And you made her like you so much that she voluntarily turned into your naughty little vixen. As he blushed, he could feel his face getting hot. Well, now that you say it that way, Kyumi, she said. I'm glad you see it my way now, she said softly as she moved one of her hands from his shoulder to one of his toned side muscles. He hummed softly as he stretched and closed his eyes. Kyumi, yes. Naruto moved one arm around her lower back and reached down with the other to grab one of her butt cheeks firmly. Are you ready to go? Are you going to use your mouth too? She asked, her cheeks turning red as he squeezed her round behind. Of course, he said in a rough voice, making her blush even more. Then he rolled them over so he was on top and she was under him. Kyumiko bit the bottom of her lip. Your voice is starting to grow on me. Really? She gave him a reassuring smile and a nod of her head. I think it's very hot. In response, Naruto moved one of his hands up to cup Kyumi's cheek and said, I'm still nowhere near as hot as you are. I'm the luckiest person in the world, I said. Definitely. Are you going to keep talking, Naruto, or are you going to kiss me? She asked with a toothy grin. Naruto then slid his other hand under her head and leaned forward as he laughed and snorted. When he kissed her, she kissed him back by parting her lips just enough so he could use his tongue if he wanted to and putting both her hands on his shoulders. He led her to tilt her head to the side, and when she did, he slipped his tongue into her mouth, as if he didn't care what had been in there just a few minutes earlier. But it looked like she cared a lot more than he did because her eyes grew wide when he did it. But they quickly closed again as she melted into the kiss. As he kept kissing her, Kyumiko was moaning and didn't even know it. She didn't mind if this was how they were going to spend the rest of the day. His lips were so firm and seemed to fit so well with hers. But as he slowly moved away from it and started to move those wonderful lips down her body, she knew they were going to do a lot more, and she was excited about it. I know you wanted to find out which part of me was the most sensitive, but, Naruto, dearest, there's only one place I want you to focus on right now, she said shyly as she slowly spread her legs for him. Her body flushed wherever he kissed it. Please, you're so hot when you act like that, he said, licking his lips as he put his lower half in the water of the hot spring and put himself between her legs. When I act all submissive for you, my dear, she asked, the corners of her lips curling up in a wanting smile as she lifted her legs into the air. Her delicate folds spread out in the same way, showing him that they were a soft pink color. Naruto put both of his hands between her thick thighs and pulled her hard toward him. This made her squeak in surprise. "Yes, Uo," she said, embarrassed by how bold he was. As he went deeper into the water, he moved his hands so they were on her inner thighs. He leaned forward and put his head between her legs while her legs were spread out. He wanted to dive right in because she smelled so sweet and enticing, but he also wanted to enjoy her as much as she had enjoyed him. She was getting aroused just by him looking. Her cheeks were flushed, and this clear, thin, and slimy liquid had begun to ooze out from her slit, down her taint and then her asshole. Some of it even managed to drip down onto the stone that she was lying on. He looked up at her and asked, "You're that excited, huh?" She nodded her head, and as she did so, her blush got stronger. "Why, yes." It was such a sweet and honest answer that he blushed as well. With a soft chuckle, he pressed his fingers against her inner thighs. This caused his fingers to sink into her fat thighs and her sex to spread even more, showing her clit and tight slit. He then tilted his head forward, swallowed quietly, and gave her a soft kiss from the bottom of her sex to her clit. She made a soft moaning sound and moved her hands up to the bend of her knees to hold her legs back as she bent them. This gave him even more room to work. She said, and her eyes got all swollen and lusty. He gave her another lick because she tasted good and made a cute noise. Then, he moved his hands around her legs to her hips, pressed his lips against her sex, and started running his tongue up and down her delicate folds. She bit her bottom lip and squeezed her eyes shut as soon as the pleasure hit her. Not being able to see made it even hotter for her. Not being able to use one of her senses made everything he did to her feel even stronger. As he kept working on her with his tongue and lips, she was now panting and her breaths were hot and labored. Kyumiko moaned when he started to look at her clit. He was gentle with it. He caressed it with his lips and swirled it around with his tongue. She thought it would be too intense, but he did everything so well that it was like magic. As he brought her closer and closer to her climax, she could feel the fire growing inside her and spreading to every part of her body, even her fingers and toes. She thought she could last longer, but he found the perfect rhythm so quickly and kept it up so well that her eyes were about to roll back into her head and she was about to pass out. "And Naruto, I am coming." She threw her head back and thought, "I can't hold back now." When her legs tightened around his head, they moved on their own. When her orgasm hit, she started shaking as she squeezed him between her big thighs. As she came in hard, a strong surge went through her, and she let out a loud cry of pleasure. As she reached her peak, her whole body turned red, her back arched, and her toes curled. Her naughty honey leaked out during her sex, coating the bottom half of his face and her inner thighs and leaving a sweet scent on him. Love. As her muscles started to relax, her legs slowly sank back down. As she tried to calm down, her chest continued to heave, making her heavy breasts rise and fall with each breath. She had thought that doing something as wonderful as this would give her the patience she needed to wait until they were both ready to go all the way together. It did nothing but make the fire inside her burn hotter. She was really becoming a naughty girl for him. "It's my turn to say it," he said, lifting the corner of his mouth. "You taste delicious, Kyumi." As she slowly looked up at him, Kyumiko's cheeks turned red. "Do I now?" "You do," Naruto said, picking up some of her poop from his chin and licking it off his finger. Her blush deepened. "I wonder if it's as hot for you to watch me eat your seed as it was for me when you did that just now." He laughed and let out a snort. "It is." She stopped talking as she put her head back down on the grass. "So far, that was the best. Kyumi, do you need help to get back into the water?" "Yes. I've been shaking so much that my legs have gone numb," she said, making him laugh. When she told him the truth, he smiled and moved closer to her, then picked her up in his arms. He carried her over to a less dirty part of the hot spring and lowered them both into the water there. The first thing she did was let out a happy sigh, while he just closed his eyes. When he finally let her go, she stayed close to him and put her cheek on his chest, which made him go ahead and put his arms around her again. As he looked down at her, he said, "You're so affectionate when we do things like this, Kyumi." When he kissed the top of her head, she purred softly and said, "It's your fault I'm like this. All the pleasure just makes my brain stop working." Naruto gave her a squeeze. "Mine too, Kyumi." It's a good thing I don't think too much anyway." Kyumiko let out an amused snort. "You might not, but I do, but I don't use it when I'm with you, so I guess it's not so bad." That was so corny. "Yeah, well, what would you have said? I love you." She turned red. "Yeah, well, I love you too, Naruto," she said. She couldn't help but smile when she felt his soothing warmth as he slept next to her. Naruto slept very deeply for a ninja, which meant that she could touch, caress, and even lick him without waking him up. She thought he was very handsome when he was awake and had that look of determination on his face. And when he was sleeping, she saw a cuter, more vulnerable side of him. She could tell at a glance whether the dreams he was having were good or bad. When he had a good dream, he would smile, but when he had a bad one, he would furrow his brow. Right now, she could tell from the way he was licking his lips that he was dreaming about ramen, or about something that had to be licked a lot. Still, she would sometimes wake up to see him with a tight face and a furrowed brow, which she knew meant he had a bad dream. Her smile started to fade. They would leave just as quickly as they came, and when he woke up, he would be back to his normal, happy self. She could tell he was having a bad dream, but she had no idea what it was about. She hadn't asked him yet because she was afraid of seeing his sweet smile slowly disappear. Yumiko knew that if she really loved Naruto, she would have to ask him out at some point. It was just as much her job as it was his to make sure her partner was happy. She would ask him when it was right, and if there wasn't, she would just do what he did and say it out loud. Naruto was impulsive, but if there was one thing that made up for it, it was that he always had the best intentions for her and for those he had left behind. Maybe that's why he kept having bad dreams. Maybe he forgot about them. Well, he did it for sure. She knew that he knew a lot of the other monkeys in the group. All those people he knows. When she broke out of the seal, she took them from him. It's possible that wasn't even the worst thing she's done to him. Yumiko took a shaky breath as a bitter sense of guilt started to rise up in her chest. It was such a strange feeling that she almost freaked out at first. She would say that the feeling was like being suffocated, chewed up, and terrible. She felt a little bit better when she looked at Naruto, but mostly she just felt worse. She squeezed her eyes shut and leaned against him, doing her best to forget, or escape, all the bad feelings she was having after finally coming to that long overdue realization. Oh, Naruto. She had changed because she loved him. She didn't recognize herself anymore, even less so when she thought about who she was before she got stuck on this island. Back then, she rarely felt so disgusted by her own actions that she recognized her own selfishness or thought about anyone other than herself. They had thought of her as many things, including nature's punishment, an evil monster, and a god. Naruto had no trouble getting past all the shallow labels she had given herself and finding the real person she had been hiding. Maybe he fell in love with her because he saw something good in her despite all the flaws she once thought were her best qualities. It made me laugh. She liked herself less and less the more she liked him. When they were just getting to know each other, she worried about whether or not he was good enough for her. Now she worried about whether she would ever be good enough for him. All those years ago, the old man had warned her about this. He had told her that she would have to go through the necessary pain of growing up if she ever wanted to feel the joy, hope, and happiness that can only come from true love. When I knew that, this pain didn't hurt as much. She knew she really loved Naruto because she felt it. She really loved him. As her smile came back, the corners of her lips began to turn up just a little bit. Right now, all she wanted was for him to wake up so she could tell him over and over again that she loved him and so she could hold him and hug all the feelings she couldn't say into him. As the sun slowly rose, she thought it wouldn't be long before he woke up and she could do all those things to him. He said, shifting his body just a little as he finally started to move. Naruto, sweetheart, wake up, she said softly as she put a gentle hand on his cheek to help him wake up. When he finally saw her, he slowly opened his eyes and smiled. Morning, Kyumi. She smiled back and gently pinched his cheek. Good morning, Naruto, she said. He asked as he rubbed his eyes, is it too late for me to watch the sun rise with you? Just a little, she said, lowering her hand slowly and brushing it along the bend in his neck before putting it on his arm. I don't care, because spending my mornings cuddled up against you is just as nice. The smile on Naruto's face became a grin. I do too, Kyumi. She said with a happy sigh. Naruto, I really like your smile, and I hope I never forget it. Then I'll be sure to smile more, he said, and she laughed at how excited he was. She gently squeezed his arm before reaching her hand down to hold his. If you smile at me all the time, you'll end up breaking my heart. I can only handle so much of that feeling in my chest. How does it make you feel? Bish, you're making me spell it out. She trailed off, the corners of her lips curling up into a smile as she leaned closer to him. Naruto, it's love. There, are you happy? Naruto's blue eyes sparkled like he was about to burst with happiness, and his smile got even bigger. Very. Yumiko blushed. Oh, Naruto. You know, he said, cupping her cheek with one hand. I never really thought that my life would turn out this way. She said sarcastically, well, you did magically teleport to some random island. He laughed and then moved closer to her. Yeah, well, I meant falling in love. After I got over my crush on Sakura, I put that kind of thing out of my mind. These days, all I can think about is you. I never really thought I would experience love. I was too great, too powerful, too grand. Being in this form has humbled me. I don't want to go back, Naruto, Kyumiko said, swallowing quietly as her cheeks slowly began to heat up. But I feel like, if I ever had the power to, I would go back. Oh, he cocked his head. She nodded. If I could go back in time, I would have done everything to make you as happy as you are now, from birth to adulthood to old age. I still remember the times I laughed at your misfortune, and it disgusts me to think that I once saw you like that, she said, closing her eyes and tilting her head forward to press her forehead against his chin. That's all in the past, he said softly as he bent down and kissed the top of her head. I don't even remember much about my childhood, so Kyuyumi, you don't have to worry about me being sad about it. She hesitated and stopped when she couldn't get her words out. Slowly, Naruto moved back and looked at her. Kyuyumi, I still feel guilty, he said. Kyuyumi, think about it this way, which made her open her eyes and look up at him. There's always time to change and become the person you want to be. Just because you did all those bad things in the past doesn't mean you can't change and do good things now. She agreed and said, you're right. Half right, anyway. I'm going to be honest, Naruto, I only care about you. I really couldn't care about the other monkeys. If he was still the same person he was when he first got stuck on the island, what she just said would have made him sick. After being with her for a few months, hearing those words made him feel special, loved, and cared for. Being with her had made him a little bit more self-centered. Kyuyumi, Naruto said to her with a smile, then put his arm around her waist. She gave him a smile in return. Knowing that you still love me despite everything I've done to hurt you calms my racing heart, but when you look at me, it starts racing again. He just said, I love you. And when you say things like that, Kyuyumiko got red in the face. Maybe if my breasts weren't so big, you'd be able to feel my heart beating faster in response to your words if they weren't so big. When she laughed at him, he said, well, that might be true. But I kind of like how big your breasts are. You guys love big breasts, don't you? Are you guilty? Kyuyumiko giggled. You know, Naruto, I used to think my breasts were disgusting. And so glad you like them. Well, Kyuyumi, I like everything about you, he replied. Your breasts, your face, your other parts, all of you. Your parts are good, too, she said in a cheesy way. Anyway, do you think we should get up? He hummed, why are you in such a hurry? Kyuyumiko closed her eyes and let out a soft sigh as she said, I guess there isn't any. Shall we sleep in? We will, he said, grinning. She put her arms around him and made herself comfortable. Good. Since they had nothing else to say, at least for now, they leaned against each other and relaxed. She buried her face in his strong chest, and he rested his chin on the top of her head. She felt safe in his arms, like nothing could hurt her as long as he held her. He thought he was the protector and that she was the one he wanted to look out for. Even though it wasn't their plan, they both ended up falling back asleep and waking up in the late afternoon. Even after they woke up, they stayed stuck to each other for another hour on their makeshift bed of leaves until Naruto finally got Kyuyumiko to stop sticking to him and get up. I am starving, he said finally as Kyuyumiko lazily got out from their hut. She rubbed her eyes, her energy from before having seemingly disappeared because of those extra hours of sleep she had gotten. I could also use something. What would you like? Asked Naruto. Meat, she said as she stretched and let out a soft groan. I'd hunt, but this form is horrible at it. So, fish and fruit again. Kyuyumiko shrugged. I guess. But, Naruto, don't you ever get bored with so little change? Well, I guess I did eat ramen almost every day when I was younger, he said with a shrug. Right? She stopped talking as she moved toward him. Do you ever wish you could eat ramen again? Sometimes, Naruto told her with a smile as he reached up and scratched her ear briefly. There are many things I miss. Her face got just a little bit tighter, and her ear twitched when she felt something. Do you now? Not as much as I used to. But yeah, he said, reaching down to cup her cheek with his hand. I've got you now, Kyuyumi, and I could never give you up to go back. She turned red. You and the things you say. Oh, that wasn't too corny for you? He asked. Kyuyumiko shook her head. No, there was just enough cheese. He laughed and said, heh, then took her hand. So, fish or fruit, or both? Most certainly both. Then both it is. Breakfast was probably the most peaceful time of their lives together. It became a tradition when they would just hang out and enjoy each other's company while watching the sun rise. Sometimes, that quiet peace went with them to breakfast. What they ate today was pretty much the same as what they ate every other day, longans, apples, and raw and cooked fish. She liked her fish raw, but he liked his fish cooked. They would sometimes eat from each other's plates, but they knew when and how much to take. They knew each other's limits and respected them, which made them both happy. When Kyuyumiko ate the last piece of fish on her plate, it was the end of their small but wonderful meal together. She liked to eat just as much as he did, but she made a bigger deal of it than he did. He broke the silence by asking Kyumi as he watched her lick her fingers clean. I wonder if you love food or me more. Of course you, she said with a soft pout. Why ask it all? His grin got a little bigger. I just wanted to hear what you had to say. Do you love ramen more than me? Definitely you, Kyumi, Naruto said in reply, reaching out to touch her cheek with his fingers. I'd rather have you than ramen any day of the week, but it wouldn't hurt to have both. Kyumiko let out an amused snort. Can you remember even how ramen tastes? He shrugged his shoulders and said, kind of. She hummed softly as a provocative question came to mind. The corner of her mouth slowly turned up into a smirk. Her smile got just a little bit bigger before she split her lips. My dear, what tastes better, ramen or me? Naruto turned red. Well, she asked with a sweet smile, but her red cheeks gave away the calm and attractive front she was trying to put up. He finally said, you taste sweet. Kyumiko's brow went up. Sweet, me, very, you taste lewdly sweet, Naruto said as he nodded his head and his cheeks rose to his ears. Her blush deepened. Is that something bad? She gave a head shake. No, not at all. I really like ... just let's say ... change the subject, Naruto. Heh, he said, amused by the fact that his girlfriend's attempt to flirt made her feel bad. Okay, Kyumi, what's a good subject? Kyumiko watched as he put his hand under his chin and made a typical pose for thinking. It was so Naruto that she almost laughed out loud. Some people might have called him dumb, but she thought he looked pretty cool at the time. She would have thought the first one at some point, though. Now, he was adorable in every way. In that way, he was almost perfect, but not quite. On the other hand, what's up, Naruto? The sudden change in her tone made him raise an eyebrow. Yes, Kyumi, I still feel guilty. What do you? Naruto's voice trailed off, so he sat down next to her. Does it have anything to do with what we talked about before? Kyumiko slowly nodded her head. Yeah. Then he put an arm around her shoulders and said, let's talk about it. Tell me more about what's making you upset. She opened her mouth to talk, but when she realized she didn't have much to say, she shut it again. She might find it funny in the future that she had all these thoughts in her head but didn't say a single word. Still, even though she was taking her time, he waited patiently, giving her a reassuring smile and a gentle squeeze on the shoulder every so often. She didn't realize her heart was beating really fast for about a minute. Before she finally spoke, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath to calm down. Love is so complicated, Naruto, she said, turning her head to look at him after a quiet sigh. You were so kind to me this morning, and you reassured me as much as you could. But I still feel like I need to do something. Anything to make up for what I did to you. Sometimes I wonder if it would be easier to just go back to how I was, but then I look over at you, and it becomes clear to me again that all these pains, these pangs of guilt that hit me from the inside, are worth it. Kyumi, his eyes became more gentle. Because I love you so much, Naruto, they are worth it. As he bent forward and pressed their foreheads together, the corners of his lips turned up into a warm smile. I love you too, Kyumi. Am I enough? She asked. I've taken away so much from you, your friends, your home, your dream, and caused you so much pain. He didn't think twice before answering. Yes, Naruto. He slowly moved back and said, I think I understand what you're trying to say. Even though it hurts, you still love me. Even though it hurts me, I still love you, Kyumi. When I first started having feelings for you, I was scared. I was scared of what that meant about me and how being on this island had changed me. But now, Kyumi, just knowing that you love me as much as I love you is all I need and all I want. So, please don't ever think that you aren't enough or that you aren't worth it. As she listened to him talk, her eyes slowly got bigger and her bottom lip started to quiver. Tiny tears started to form on her eyelids. Even though his words may have been awkward, she understood what he was trying to say. When he hugged her back, she closed her eyes and gave him a tight hug. She asked him quietly, what did I do to deserve you? He gently squeezed her shoulder. I could ask you the same thing. As she kept hugging him, a happy tear slowly rolled down her cheek. Now that he had forgiven her, his warmth seemed to comfort her even more. As they sat there in each other's arms in silence, she could still feel the ghosts of the guilt that had been bothering her just a few minutes before. However, she could also feel that they were quickly going away. She would have never been able to go through this if she hadn't just said what she was feeling. Somehow, they had gotten even closer, even though they were already close. She thought there was nowhere else to go. But then he jumped out of nowhere and pushed her forward into his strong, wonderful arms. She turned his head and pressed her cheek against his chest as she melted into him. I love you, Naruto. I love you too, Kyumi. She laughed out loud at how quickly he answered. I'm sorry that we had such a heavy conversation to start the day. Don't worry about it. I'm glad you trust me enough to tell me these things, Naruto said as he reached up to stroke her head. I'm happy. Just happy. He smiled and then sighed with happiness. Me too, Kyuumi. How did she get him to agree to do it again? Oh yeah. She had given him a lot of kisses, hugs, and sweet looks. She had done other things, some of which were very naughty, to get him to go on this trip with her. See, he was perfectly happy just hanging out at their new place with the fancy onsen and the great leaf hut. But it seemed like she had a sudden need for adventure and wanted him to help her scratch it. He would have been happy to scratch her itch if it was normal or perverted, but not this kind. He might have become a slob because he did nothing all the time, but all he wanted to do was hang out with his girlfriend. Was that asking too much? He looked at his sore feet as if he thought they would tell him something. Obviously, he did not get one. After all, they were just his feet. Just these poor feet, which hurt from all the walking he had done so far. He wasn't just going for a walk, he was going up the side of a mountain. From that cozy place they had made in the jungle, they had gone through several kilometers of thick vegetation and were now climbing a freaking mountain. He made a quiet grunt as he pressed his lips together and forced his leg up to climb a slightly steep ledge. Was it just him, or did it seem like it was getting harder and harder for him to move like he used to? It didn't work as well as it used to when he pumped chakra into his legs. It was, as Shikamaru might put it, troublesome. Tilting his head up, he saw Kyumiko skipping along ahead of him. She was as lively as ever, even more so than he was at the moment. She was humming to herself as she enjoyed the sun on her back and the slightly cooler mountain air flowing through her silky, orange hair. God, she was pretty even from behind. He was so lucky to find a woman as beautiful and funny as she was. Being with this kind of person meant that giving his all was the least he could do to win her favor, but he didn't mind, because he loved her. He caught up to her a little bit by forcing himself to hike quickly up a few rocky steps. As she walked, he reached out to put his hand on her shoulder, but missed. Gah, my legs are numb, he said as he pulled his hand back to wipe some sweat off his forehead. She turned her face toward him. Naruto, are you okay? Naruto gave her a smile and said, yeah, I'm just a little tired. I haven't had to move so much in a very, very long time. I forget that you normal people have to keep moving to stay in shape. Kyumiko said as she slowed down long enough for him to catch up to her. However, I can still see through your shirt that you have about the same amount of muscle as you did before. The way she stopped talking made him raise an eyebrow. Kyumi, I'm sorry, I was just admiring, she said with a sly grin. When he figured out what she meant, he blushed. I wonder if this is how you feel when you catch me staring at your chest or behind. He said this with his cheeks still red. She was happy. No, I don't want you to look at me like that anymore. It just makes me feel happy. Happy. Maybe proud is a better word. Proud. Happy. Maybe I just like it when you look at me, Kyumiko said as she held out her hand to him and shrugged her shoulders. When she smiled at him, Naruto took her hand and squeezed it as soon as their fingers touched. Her hand was so small and delicate that he felt like he could break it if he wasn't careful. But he knew the opposite was true. Kyumiko could kill him with her pinky finger if she wanted to. Lucky for us, she didn't. He turned his head to look at her and asked, so, does that mean I should look at you even more? You should do a lot more things to me, she replied with a wink and a nudge of her elbow to his side. You might want to try some new things with me, too. He could feel his cheeks getting warmer again. Huh? Like what? Kyumi. Now it was her turn to be embarrassed. What she said was supposed to make his face turn red and make him quiet in a cute way. She hadn't planned for him to ask her a question back, which was a bit of a mistake because the question she had asked would have made him answer. Now, as she walked in silence, she could feel that the power between them was shifting away from her and toward him. Oh, how things had turned around. She trailed off as her blush slowly spread to the sides of her face. I mean, Naruto smiled and pushed her back as he asked, what do you mean? She was sad. You know what I mean, sweetheart. Don't make me say it. I still want to keep some of my modesty. He softly hummed, and his smile grew a little wider when he realized that she was using the word darling to win him over, which it did. He then let out a soft sigh. All right, Kyumi, I won't make you say it. You won't, he replied. Well, now that you say that, I kind of want to. I think you also want to tell me, he said. Kyumiko gently bit down on her full bottom lip and then slowly nodded. Somewhat. I think what you're about to say is going to be lewd. She nodded again. Why yes, I wonder what people would think if they knew I could make the famous nine-tailed fox stutter, he thought, and then decided to change the subject to help her. Kyumiko puffed out her cheeks at him and said, I'd be ruined. But, if you insist. Oh, he cocked his head. Kyumiko shrugged her shoulders. Why should I care what monkeys think about me? If I wanted to, I could kill them all with my pinky finger. Huh? Yours is the only monkey's opinion I care about, Naruto, she said firmly as she squeezed his hand. When he heard her say that, he just couldn't help but smile. That is very nice. If you think about it, you're kind of a race traitor because you're betraying your fellow monkeys to be with me, Kyumiko said, tilting her head to look up at him. Well, if you think about it, I'm pretty much a hero since I beat the nine-tailed fox when so many others had failed, he said in response. She said, SHH, and smiled at him. So far, the only thing you've won over is my heart. My body is still mostly unconquered. Most of the time. When Kyumiko blushed, her cheeks turned a cute shade of pink. Maybe, Naruto, after we get to the top of the mountain. Once we get to the top or once we get down. He asked her straight out, making her blush even more. And perhaps we can talk about it after. Naruto let out a happy sigh before they bumped into each other. We can wait as long as we want to talk about things like that, Kyumi. Don't worry that I want you to push yourself. But, I want to. She looked up into his eyes as her words trailed off. As she looked into them, they got bigger. Oh, she asked in a soft voice, don't you? He got a red face. Of course, I'm sure, but I can tell that you and I are both a little nervous about it. It's funny that we already do all these naughty things to each other, but sex is the one thing that makes us so nervous, she said with a smirk and a blush. Is that so, Naruto? Naruto smiled in response to her smirk. You'd think it would be something else, but I'm fine with this. I think it's natural, you know. Couples can go at any pace they want, and as long as things work out, it's all good. She leaned against him as they walked and said, that makes a lot of sense. For someone like me who doesn't know much about these kinds of things, you are so much smarter about them. When he felt her put her cheek on his shoulder, he looked down at her. Well, I guess I'm pretty good at relationships, since I did get you to be my girlfriend. Kyumiko replied, yeah, that's true, and then she gave a soft laugh. Man, you know, this talk was helping me a little bit at first, but now all I can think about is how sore my legs are, he said with a grunt as he took a long step to stretch himself out. She looked up at him and said, I can give you a ride on my back. He blinked. Wouldn't that be kind of strange? Not as weird as you complaining about how short your monkey legs are, she said with a smirk. See, now I feel like I should complain even more, Naruto said in reply, nudging her gently. Kyumiko let out an amused snort. What, you don't like the idea of having a woman carry you around? Well, I mean, no, it's not like that, he stuttered as his cheeks turned red, which made her laugh. I'm just having fun with you, Naruto. He was sad. All right, I love it when you get embarrassed, my dear. It really brings out the blue in your eyes and the yellow in your hair when there are bits of red in the mix, Kyumiko said with a sly grin. Kind of like how I like it when I spank you and your skin turns a little red. Her eyes got big, and she turned red quickly. And Naruto, after he snorted, he said, and the corners of his lips curled up into a toothy smile. Looks like the tables have turned, Kyumi. Now it's you who's blushing. Yes, but unlike you, I was able to make you blush without mentioning. Spanking. Kyumiko's cheeks were puffed out and her brow was furrowed as she looked at him. HMPH. Okay. That was a low blow, Naruto said with an apology smile as he reached over and patted her on the head. Sorry, you'll have to do better than that, honey, she said with her cheeks still puffed out. I don't want to just hear what you say, I want to see what you do, too. When we get back, I want you to give me a massage. Alright, I want you to take a bath with me. Sure, and a belly rub for an hour. Also, she made a face. I want you to do that thing with your tongue again. Naruto gave a slow nod of the head. Yeah, okay, that seems fair. I hope I don't pass out as soon as I get home. Kyumiko said, no, you won't. You're stronger than that, my dear. If you say so. She pushed him a little. Yes, I know. After she said that, the edges of his lips turned up into a small smile on his face. When he started to get some of his energy back, he thought that maybe walking up the side of a mountain wouldn't be so bad. He could definitely make it if he had good company, fresh air, and a beautiful view of the jungle below and Kyumiko next to him. He did end up getting there in the end. He took the last step up and made it to the top of the mountain. He was tired, worn out, and about to break. His legs and arm were numb because Kyumiko had to hold on to him tightly for the last couple of minutes to keep him from falling down and killing himself. Even though he pretty much hated everything he had to do to get there, he was glad he had made it. It looked like Kyumiko was happy, too, because as soon as he fell down, she started clapping. Congratulations, Naruto. You made it, she said quietly, giggling at how tired her boyfriend looked. Naruto did nothing but grunt in response. You know, with your butt up like that, you look really ugly, Kyumiko said as she walked over to him and poked him on the backside with her finger. Too tired to care? was his quiet answer. She knelt down next to him and said softly, "Come on, honey. I'm sure you have a little more energy to spare." He made a groaning sound. "Ugh, perhaps. No maybes," Kiyumiko said with a pout as she put both of her arms under him to try to turn him over. "You've already made it this far. Use whatever energy you have left to join me in enjoying the view," he asked quietly as he was rolled onto his back. "Is it really that good?" "It is." He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, which he really needed, before slowly getting to his feet. He grunted again, this time because his legs were starting to hurt. He then opened his eyes and took a look around. In fact, the view was very pretty, though he ended up just staring at Kiyumiko as he took in the beautiful misty clouds and bits of green and bright colors from the jungle that could be seen through them. "Yes, you're right, the view is great," he told her with a smile. She made a face at him. "All you ever do is look at me." "That's because you're the most beautiful person on the island," he said, widening his smile when Kiyumiko's cheeks turned red. Me? Kiyumiko smacked him on the chest in fun. "You and your sweet words, Naruto, are sweeter than apples with honey." He hit her on the back of the shoulder and said, "Only when I'm with you, Kiyumi." "Aha," she said as she sat down next to him and put her head on his shoulder. "We both know that's not true. I didn't make you the kind person you are, Naruto," he said. Even though he was tired, he was quick to put his arm around her. "Well, at least I can thank you for keeping me nice. If I were on this island by myself, I'd probably go crazy or something. I forget how easy it is for your kind to get lonely," Kiyumiko said, putting one hand on his lap. "I guess I am now, too. I wouldn't last long with you around, my sweetheart. I'm sure you're strong enough to get by without me." She gave a head shake. "No, not at all. I don't want to even think about going on without you. Kiyumi, I love you more than life itself, Naruto." She stopped, turned slowly to face him, and hugged him. When she hugged him back, Naruto put one hand behind her head and kept the other on her upper back. "I love you too, Kiyumi. Naruto, I know you can't help but think about the future, but, well, just focus on the present for me, okay? I want you to enjoy the time we have together as much as possible," he said softly as he gave her a firm, loving squeeze, as if he could sense her worries. She stopped herself. "You're right, Naruto. I'll do my best, right now, while I still have you, to love you as much as I can." Slowly, Naruto moved back so he could see her face and look into her eyes. "I can see why you wanted me to come all the way up here with you. It's a very romantic place up here in the middle of the island. If you think about it, we're so close to the sky that it's almost like we're both in heaven." "No, we're in heaven," she said with a warm smile. "I am, at least." "Are you?" "I am," he said with a smile, and then he kissed her lips quickly. Kiyumiko whined softly when he separated from her, expecting the kiss to be much deeper. Clasping her hands behind his neck, she pulled him in against her and kissed him the way that she had wanted him to kiss her. She wanted every kiss between them to be deep, passionate, and full of love. As she kept kissing him, his hands moved to her wide hips. When he squeezed them, she made a soft moan into his mouth. At first, it looked like he was going to take control, but he gave up before she did, which made her very happy. Not often could she get him to give in first, so this was a very special time for her. She finally stepped back. She pulled away from him slowly and gently, then licked her lips to taste the small strands of saliva he had left there while they were kissing. When she looked back at him, she laughed softly when she saw that his blue eyes were glazed over. It looked like her kiss had shocked him so much that he needed a moment to get his bearings. "Maybe it's just me, but I find it much more interesting to kiss on top of a mountain than in the middle of a jungle." He gave a slow nod of the head. "Absolutely. Even so." She tilted her head and asked, "Though, what do we do to get down?" Kiyumiko blinked. Well, my legs are going numb, and it's starting to get dark. I kiss you so sweetly, and all you can think about is how numb your legs are." He turned red. Well, she gave him a light push that she meant to be light. "Naruto, way to spoil the moment."
This was it for the series. If you wanna watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel. Till then, we weeb offline.